why don't we go ahead and get started, because I think we do have a quorum.
I know, it's bananas, right?
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call the October meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors to order. Thank you all for being here. I'll ask our secretary to please call the roll.
Chair Kathleen.
Here.
Vice Chair Price. Arvish Gardner.
Here.
Matt Harris.
Here.
Praveen Tapkam. Jesse O'Connell.
Present.
Lori Orr. Here. Kirsten Phelps. Kendall Taylor. Najasha Thomas. Arthur Lips. Chair Kathleen, you have a quorum, moves not present, Vice Chair Price. Praveen Tapkam. Kirsten Phelps, Kendall Taylor, and Arthur Lips.
Thank you. And Steve is on international work travel in a very different time zone, so he's unable to join us tonight. And Art and his wife welcomed their first child over the weekend. So hopefully in November, I know it was a boy, he didn't tell me the name, but hopefully we'll see a picture at the next meeting. So we wish him and his family well. Kirsten is going to be joining us remotely.
And Praveen is 3 minutes out.
Praveen is 3 minutes out, so we'll be here shortly. We come to the West End once a year to gather and be closer to where many of our riders live, and this is actually only the second time the board has ever met on west of Quaker Lane. The Dash facility is close, but not quite west of Quaker Lane, so this is kind of a commitment to the West End. So thank you all for making the trip, and thank you staff for putting this together and working logistics out with the city. Let's go ahead and do our public comment period. So I had asked if there were any speakers who had pre-registered. Doesn't actually appear we have any members of the public who are here tonight, but we may have some online. So I'll go ahead and read our public comment period statement. We're about to convene into public comment. All dashboard meetings include a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, as we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our riders and community members. The board is here to listen. However, please keep in mind that the public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns or questions tonight. We take any concerns and questions seriously and need sufficient time to process and research any issues if need be. Board members will respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff member get back to you at the appropriate time. Please note that personnel matters are not a part of the public comment period. However, please know that we take any personnel questions seriously. You're asked to contact the DAF administration with any such concerns. We ask that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. Further, we ask that speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than the audience. The board will take pre-registered speakers first, and I will invite others who wish to speak who may not have pre-registered. For future meetings, you may pre-register on the website dashbus.com on the board of directors page. I will now call our first speaker. Please remember each individual speaker is allowed 3 minutes for your comments. If you're speaking on behalf of a neighborhood civic association or unit owners association, please identify yourself accordingly, and you may be recognized for up to 5 minutes. So as I'm assuming have no speakers in the room, I'm going to ask if we have anybody online. If you have not pre-registered, you may use the raise hand feature, and we will pause to keep time for that.
They're all waiting on them. I also see Kirsten that's got online. Might check their audio.
Okay.
Sure if we can hear her.
Chris, if you heard that, go ahead and unmute so we can just make sure that we can hear you.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Great, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I did not see any hands go up of the attendees on here.
All right, good efficient use of our time. We'll go ahead and close public comment. We are joined tonight by our General Counsel Lonnie Rich, and it's a treat to have him because he's going to provide some information, an update to a training he did last year on the basics of FOIA. I believe all of you have Lonnie's handout here, and this will be very useful training because actually we're also updating our virtual meeting policy, and we'll be coming to you with some, to get your edits on that as well, make sure we're compliant. So I think it's very timely that we have this training tonight. So Lonnie, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you about the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. I was here last year, and my presentation will pretty much follow the same, or very close to the same information that I provided last year. There's a couple of minor updates, but this subject will be important for all the new members, and I think it's a good refresher for the members who've heard all this before. Because I will tell you, I really believe that the Freedom of Information Act is one of those good government pieces of legislation that helps make our system of government work better. It's transparency. Important decisions are made, but if the public understands them better and can weigh in as appropriate, and feel like that the public business is being taken care of in an appropriate way. And when you're transparent, which means open meetings and access to information, those are the two pieces that are the main. That is the Freedom of Information Act. It's open meetings, which is really what governs you guys, and access to information, which is when you make a FOIA request. That doesn't concern the board so much, but it does concern the staff. And so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the access to information. I will highlight a few things at the end of this. I want to mostly talk about open meetings. And before I get started, anytime you have a question, feel free to jump in. You don't have to wait till the end. Just interrupt me and I'll do the best I can. I'll either answer your question or tell you, I'll get back to you. And I've had to do that before. The first thing I want to emphasize is that there is a presumption that all of your meetings are open to the public. It's fully open. And there's also a presumption that the public is entitled to any information that ATC has as a corporate body, including information that you have. So we're gonna talk about that. On the subject of open meetings, there's the first question here, what is a meeting? Well, it's fairly simple to state the rule. Three of you get together and talk about dash business. That is a meeting, and you have to comply with the open meeting rules. Now, sometimes it's easier to say, well, what's not a meeting? Because there's some close questions. One, the two of you get together and talk about dash business. That is not a meeting. That is, you can do that until the cows come home. So that's fine. But if there are three of you, you have to have an open meeting. If two board members and one staff member meet, that is not a meeting. Because what we're looking to is board members. If it's three or more board members, then it's an open meeting, talking about government business. What about 10 staff members that get together to talk about dash policy? That is not an open, that does not require an open meeting. Rules. One example that I like is, what about three board members that decide they're going to go to a Mets baseball game? Does that require the open meeting requirements? Well, it depends. If you don't talk about dash business, it doesn't. It's personal. It's not you don't have to comply with anything. You should go to the ball game. However, if you go to the ball game, you can't decide, that you're gonna have a little sidebar and deal with dash business. That violates the rules. Another example that is pertinent at this time of year, because we've got elections, we've got city council, school board elections, Congress, president, everything. Can three board members attend a political event? And again, it depends. If it is an event that is free and open to the public and advertised, so it's like public meeting, then you can attend, even if issues related to dash are being discussed by whoever's running for office, or whoever, if there's a group doing a presentation about transportation policy in the city, board members can go and listen. What you can't do is huddle off to the side and complain about what they said about dash, or dispute it, or figure out how to solve the problem. That's not, you can't do that, but you can attend these open public meetings. What about email? Well, it's sort of similar, it's still the same rule. If three of you are on email together and you are doing replies to all, that's an assembly, or it's a virtual meeting. And you can't do that without complying with the open meeting rules. But if Joe sends an email to Sue, and Sue to Tom, and Tom to Betty, and Betty back to Tom in series, that's not a meeting. So you can email, so as long as it's only two people directly involved, it's okay. I think there may be a question if you then start, um, uh, forwarding the conversation. That just, I don't really know the answer to that. That's probably getting close to assembling a meeting, and you just shouldn't do it. You just keep it one-on-one, and you're not gonna have any problems. There are a couple of things about open meetings and the whole subject of virtual meetings. There's two issues with regard to virtual meetings. One is the body meeting virtually. In other words, this board meeting virtually. That can be done in limited circumstances. The general rule is you can't. The general rule is unless the governor has declared an emergency, you can't have virtual meet. You can just get on Zoom and have a big meeting. There's an exception. If the board adopts a policy, then you can have these virtual meetings in certain circumstances. But it's limited. You can only do it. It's either 2 times a year or 50% of the meetings. And this is a change. It used to be 25% of the meetings, whichever was greater, the 2 meetings, or 25% of the meetings in a year can be virtual if it's done by pursuant to a board policy. And then once you, so that's and the other part of this, of the virtual meeting is, let's say we're having this meeting now, which is at a place, but you have somebody that wants to participate. As long as there's several conditions that are required in order for somebody who's not present to be able to participate. And that is, it has to be somebody who has a disability, who's taking care of somebody with a disability. They reside more than 60 miles away. Or it's a personal reason, like you're on travel for your job. Now, this latter personal reason can only be used for a limited number of times. You can only use it either 2 times or 25% for meetings in a year. And you use a personal reason for participating remotely. Otherwise, you're supposed to be present. That's the general rule.
So the board last meeting talked a little bit about, and Jeff Kaplan and I had been discussing revisions to the electronic meeting for the electronic participation policy, the dash pass. And we had 2 questions, and maybe you know them right off the top of your head, but they were a follow-up for me to talk with you. If you don't know them, we'll talk later.
Okay.
But one was related to caring for a family member or an elderly or a disabled family member, I believe, I don't know.
That's one of the.
We believe that has now been a possible permanent reason, so that there is no limit to the number of times you can.
No, the limit doesn't apply to any of the 3 if you're disabled, you're taking care of a disabled member, or you live 60 miles, more than 60 miles away, you can be unlimited. The limit is only for personal reasons like travel, a wedding.
That was what we were talking about.
That's at least somebody. Send me those questions and I'll check it, but I think that's the rule. But those limits only apply.
That is,
To personal. Okay,
that's the rule.
so I got it right.
No, you always do, or if you don't guess, which is fair.
Right, so that was part of the revision, and David and I spoke last night, we were going through the revision and putting it back to the board. So that saves us paying you extra time to research it, but was there another?
Well, the other question was, I've been through some training with the Commission on Aging about the virtual meeting, and some of the others who serve on boards and commissions that have that at the city attorney's office. Do those count? We believe that those absences, with the exception of the personal travel, now that person counts towards the quorum, even if they're not. We wanted to make sure that that's reflected properly in our policies.
I believe if you are permitted, if it's a situation where you're permitted to participate virtually, then it does count.
Well, our understanding was they could vote, but that, but at least the 2 times a year for personal travel and things like that, and work stuff, that you still had to have quorum within the room. But it was our understanding, at least something I heard from the city attorney's office, led me to believe that those other exceptions, which can be permanent, may now enable that person, even though they're not in the room, to be part of that quorum that has to be, which you have to have. that you can count that person as if they were.
I think that's right, but I want to check it.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna ask you for that before we circulate.
That's the policy.
I see it.
Follow up on that. I've never gotten clear advice on that.
Okay, because that we want.
I'll talk to the city attorney's office. I've got a good relationship with them. I've worked with them a lot on these because they know it. They deal with it every day. But
Well,
I'll check.
they'll send me an email too.
Okay, well, you can,
I can
you can,
email it to you though.
you can send me an email with the
I
two
will.
questions and I'll confirm.
So background of board members, so we have a virtual electronic participation policy that was passed in 2021, but doesn't reflect the code changes that were made at the last
Yeah.
legislative session, which is what we're trying to update for, and so we can take advantage of the flexibilities there.
Okay, once you have decided that you need to have an official meeting, it's a meeting, whatever you're doing is a meeting, then the requirements are, that they're not onerous, but there is a process. You have to give notice to the public so that the public knows when you're meeting, they have to know when, where, and the time and date. Now, you're not required to provide an agenda, but once the agenda is made and made available to members or a packet goes out, that needs to be available to the public. So they can request it and get it, and they should be having access to it at the same time the board members do it. And then, the notice has to be posted 3 work days, needs to be posted in 2 public places. In Josh's office and in somewhere else. And then, it also needs to be posted on the website. So that's the notice. And then the final thing is that after the meeting, there have to be minutes. It's an official meeting, you need minutes. So that there's a record of what you did. Now, it is possible to have closed meetings, to have a closed portion of a meeting. One of the things that, and this is something that I really didn't realize until I was just learning this stuff again, but you have to be in an open meeting before you can have a closed meeting. You can't go to a Nats game and say, hey, let's have a closed meeting, and because we got some personnel matter we need to talk about. You can't do that. It's got to be in an open meeting, because before you can have a closed meeting, you have to make a motion that is approved by the body, your board. And the motion has to say subject, purpose, and recite the exemption. So if it's the Smith versus Jones lawsuit that the Dash is involved in, the purpose is to discuss a settlement proposal, and the exemption is litigation or attorney advice. That would be one of the, that would be a proper purpose for a closed meeting. Now, once that motion is approved, you go into the closed meeting, you ask the public to leave, staff can stay. Or whoever you want to stay, that's gonna be providing advice or counseling, whatever the subject is. But once the closed meeting is over, then you go back into public session, and you have to certify. You have to certify closed meeting only dealt with what you said it was. If you said you were going to talk about the Smith lawsuit, you can't go in and talk about the Smith lawsuit, the Baker lawsuit, the whatever else, whatever kind of litigation. You can't do that, because that's not what you said you were going to do. So that's the certification. And if there were any votes taken in the closed meeting, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a preliminary vote. You have to vote again in public, and so that the public knows the results of what went on in the closed meeting. A question that comes up about closed meetings is the meeting confidential? Can the board say to the other board members and to staff, when we go into closed session, you cannot discuss this with anybody, not the press, not the public, not your spouse, but can't do that. It is not confidential. Now, as a practical matter, it is wise for board members to exercise restraint. Because you're going into a board meeting, you're going into these closed sessions because there is some level of sensitivity. If you go out and you broadcast exactly who said what in the closed meeting, then you need to be aware that that's not good for the body, and it's also when there's something comes up that is sensitive to you, that means somebody else is gonna go talk, you're afraid to talk about that, and you're not gonna like it. So there's a certain amount of doing to others, that comes into play with on this subject.
Ron, what's the reason for not allowing things in a closed meeting to be confidential? You know, why?
Well, because it's really the purpose is. You know, it really probably goes back to the presumption that everything that is done by government is supposed to be open, that's the presumption. That it's open, it's accessible. And there are limited purposes where you have a closed meeting because it facilitates easier discussion among the board members, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not it should be to public.
Well, what if a lawyer is telling us about a case and it's confidential attorney client privilege, still you can talk about it?
Well,
Or you can talk
the
about
board,
it? I mean,
the attorney the privilege doesn't belong to the attorney.
That's
The privilege belongs to the client. The client can do anything they want to with it. Now, most of the time they don't broadcast it, and most of the time board members won't. You know, if a board member does, I think uh, I don't have any better explanation other than that's what the rules is.
this always has kind of troubled me. And especially like, you know, what if we have packet materials, you know, somebody's salary? Is that, can we keep that confidential? I mean, you said we have to post our packets before the meetings.
I think there may be some things where, okay, first of all, almost all exceptions for public access to information is because of an exemption. But the exemption doesn't mean you are precluded from making it available. It's discretionary. You can simply not disclose it, or you can disclose it. There are a few subjects, though, that you cannot disclose. You're prohibited by positive law. Positive rule of law says you cannot disclose the grades of T.C. Williams students, or the health situation of an employee. It may be a rule, I don't know this off the top of my head. I don't know, I don't think salaries are non-disclosable anyway. I think they're, it may be above a certain level.
You know, and I'm talking kind of, I remember this, on my HOA, like people are delinquent in their dues, and we discuss that in executive session, we don't allow that in our packet, it's going to go to the board members. So, you know, with something like that here and dash,
I mean, I think the better part of wisdom would be for the board not to talk about it outside of the board meeting, that if a member does, I'm not sure what there is other than impression.
but are the materials that we support an executive session, are those something that we need to give to everybody?
If they are exempt from disclosure, then you don't have to give it to them. If you're prohibited from giving it, you can't give it.
Okay, so then, like, you know, like Josh's review, you don't want people to know that while we're discussing it and deliberating it, where people can doubt, but is that something we would have to disclose?
You come to the board?
Yeah,
No,
like if we do.
the board
an
does not
executive
have to talk about
session. Okay,
the closed session. But I mean, most
well,
boards.
I know we don't have to, but is there a positive law that says?
I don't know of anything that says that you can't, because you didn't have to go into closed session.
Okay, okay.
If the board's,
That makes
I mean,
sense.
the board
I
has
see what you're saying.
more
Yeah,
control
yeah.
by the board over what the board does than over what an individual board member does, which, as I understand it, there's no way the board can direct all the members. You can't discuss.
Well,
this
the
without-
last question is, are those materials foilable?
Oh, if they are foilable, then you go to the other set of rules, which are the rules regarding access to public information. If it's public information and there's an exemption, then you don't have to give it. And if it's certain information, you can't give it.
Okay, that's the more specific from that. So say the chair has prepared a draft performance review of Josh and brings it in to an executive session as prepared material. And everyone disagrees with it. It's way off base. Can, can a reporter via FOIA get access to that document? And then publish that David said all these awful things about Josh?
So what was the last part?
Can a reporter then access that draft material through FOIA? And then write a story saying the board chair, David, wrote all these awful things about Josh?
Um, I think personnel records are one of the categories of exemptions.
Okay,
Uh,
so when we're discussing
we're talking
performance
non-exempt, we're
reviews,
talking about non-exempt information. Then generally, and I, if you get to that, in terms of what kind of records, it's not just final decisions that are available to the public. There are drafts, there are handwritten notes, there are emails, there's text, there's all slew of things. And if it's not exempt, then you have to make it available. It's exempt, there's discretionary.
Okay.
Unless there's a positive rule of law that prohibits it.
so, sorry, where would a,
So
Performance review
I
fall
think
in
it would be exempt
okay,
if it's personnel.
thanks. Thanks for playing the bill on my example, David. Just
We'll
want to make it
be
really
talking soon about how
concrete.
we do our performance.
Right.
reviews. I don't mind the whole
But to your
thing.
point, if someone was to FOIA dash personnel records involved in one of our employees, that's exempt. So we won't release that, we can deny the
Right.
FOIA request. So it sounds like what Lonnie is saying, it's the same would apply. In this situation, and most of the things you talk about in executive session are exempt anyway.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't prevent an individual from saying, board member from saying, hey, I don't agree with this or whatever, and I'm gonna.
And they go out, talk to the post
Yeah.
and say, David trashed Josh and it's terrible and he needs to be fired. I mean, I don't know what you do about it. I mean,
Yeah.
board members have to exercise discretion and be wise. And that doesn't sound to me like that's very wise.
And is there any fiduciary duty that goes along with that to maintain confidentiality? I mean, typically, the fiduciary duty is only over the stockholders, which is the city in this case, but is there any type of duty that a director has to an employee or to the corporation or to the entity that would come into play at all?
I'm not aware of, because my understanding of the rule is that the board cannot direct or other board, any board member to not discuss what went on in executive session.
Mhm.
And so I think it's a different kind of, I mean, corporate board, you have a duty of loyalty that may, prohibit that. But a public board is different, because it's the public's business.
Thanks.
I want to talk, just a couple minutes about, access to public records. What is a public record? Well, it's anything that's written in any format. It could be letters, it could be documents, it could be, handwritten notes, text, email, drafts, personal notes. One of the complicated kind of questions is, and I think I got this question last year and I didn't know the answer, and I still didn't know the answer very well. But it's, what about personal notes of a board member that, well, a couple of different scenarios. If those personal notes get into Dash's files, then it's part of the public information. If the board member is taking notes on their agenda, they take it home and they because they just obsessive and they take notes. That's what they do. They get home and they throw it away. I don't think that's a public record because it's not doing any particular. It's not used for any public purpose. One of the two ones I've tried to figure out is if you take notes on your agenda, because what you want to do is then when the minutes come out, you want to check the minutes against your notes to see if they got it right or they got it wrong. Though that probably is a public record because it's used for used for one of the public purposes, one of the things you have to do is just to keep minutes. And so, but I wouldn't follow my sword on that answer. I think I can make an argument the other way, but, I think the best policy, frankly, and this is true about things that people say in the executive, in a close meeting, or it's things that you write, about the public business, is that if you don't want to see it on the front page of the Washington Post, don't say it and don't write it. That was my rule as when I was an elected official, was if I didn't want to see it splashed, and as embarrassing as it might be, I should not say it. Or if I do say it, know that there's a chance that it's gonna end up there. Because some board member, you say something nasty about Josh in a closed meeting, and another board member goes and tells Josh, well, there's gonna be various repercussions that are more personal than anything, but, you just need to be aware of it. Who can make a request? Well, any resident of Virginia can make a request for information. And who do they make it to? They can make it to a board member, they can make it to a staff member. And what's the form? It could be a letter, it could be an email, it could be, hey, John, can you tell me what's going on with Route 63 out on Duke Street? What's the current status? I understand y'all are canceling that. If you think somebody's asking for information about that, then that is a request. Now, there may be an exception that applies, but anytime you get a request for public information, you need to talk to whoever the FYI officer is or Dash and let them address what needs to be provided, whether there's an exemption that applies or not.
So Ron, when we have our public comments, people often make requests.
Yeah, that's a request.
Okay.
That's an FYI. And you don't have to say, this is an FYI request. You can say, I want to know how many buses does Dash have? That's an FYI request. I mean, if it sounds to you like somebody's asking for information about Dash, then that's an FYI request.
How do we know when the time starts and who to send it?
Well, it starts when you get it.
How do we know who to send it to?
Who's our FOI officer?
Well, no, I don't mean that. Like, if someone's speaking, we don't know where they live. We don't know how to get in touch with them.
Well,
We do, we collect information. on students.
I mean, someone just is in person, we don't know. It's not their address. We don't reply, but
Tell them we'll get back to them.
Okay, we don't have that formal system.
Yeah, right.
I mean, my system
systems
is
aren't
like,
perfect.
well, the thing is, like, if they don't follow up, it's not
Right.
like, okay.
Yeah, usually we'll try to follow up with them if nothing happens. Maybe they just wanted to say something. They didn't really care about how the response. Then we usually try, and then if we can't, we assume that they're satisfied unless we hear back.
And so.
I think the issue would be if we said, well, we can't tell you that.
That's,
We won't tell you how many buses there are there. Like, to your point, I think that's where that line would be from.
There.
Did I hear you say we only respond to residents of Virginia? Somebody wrote and asked for information and wasn't from Virginia? What's the?
Well, they're not entitled to it if it's an individual. If they're not a resident of Virginia, they're not entitled to it. Now, I don't know how you know that. I think the better. I mean, how many times do you get somebody from Montana asking? about
I'm
Dash?
on my other hand, and to the real estate office, we get information requests all the time for all kinds of data, and I don't think that we're always checking to see if it's a resident.
Well, if it's information that could be given out, then there's nothing that prohibits you from giving information to anybody in the world. I mean, I suppose these rules are written so that you don't have, 5,000 people, asking every city agency for all the records. But the other thing is news sources. Whether it's radio, TV, or whatever, if they serve in Virginia, then they are entitled ask for information. So that's just another group. What are the possible responses? Well, there's 5 of them. 5 possible responses. First one is, what you asked for, here it is. You give it to them. Just give it to them. Second one is, there's an exemption and you say, sorry, I'm not, this is exempt, I'm not gonna give it to you. Third is, you've asked for 5 things, 3 are exempt and 2 are non-exempt, I'm gonna give you 2 that are not exempt, I'm not giving you the third. The fourth response is, I'm not sure if we have this record, I'm not sure if it exists. And you don't have to produce a record. If somebody asks for something that you don't have, and you don't have as such, you just tell them, we don't have that, like that. Now, if you have it in some other format, you may need to do that, but you don't have to create a document for somebody. And then so you can say that you can say it can't be found or it doesn't exist. So that's the fourth. The fifth one is, I need more time to respond to one of the other 4 possibilities. And that's where you start off with 5 days, 5 business days to get from the time they make the request until they provide a response. If you need more time, you can get up to 7 additional working days. And you can also negotiate with the party to for additional time. If it's something that's, that somebody really wants, if it's gonna be a whole lot of work, you can get additional time through just negotiating with the other party. You can charge. If it's gonna cost you more than $200, you can charge, you can ask for the fee before you provide the information. Now, you can't charge, that one of the new rules is you can't charge for the first hour of time. But you can charge for time. You can't charge for overhead like benefits and health insurance, also. You can't do all that. But you can charge copying charges and time. Most of the time, it's not done. It's more trouble than it's worth. But if somebody asks for an extremely large quantity of documents that you can't easily send by email, PDF or whatever, then it's going to be a lot of copying. We charge the bill in advance. That you can do that. One question that I like to answer is, how is Freedom of Information Act enforced? Well, if you have a meeting and you have to follow the open meeting rules, or if you refuse to give information that the public has a right to, the public that's agreed, the party that's agreed, you can go to court and seek an injunction or a mandamus. Mandamus is just an order for government official that you have to do something. And they win, they get attorney's fees. And the individual wrongdoer, the person who squirreled away the information and has refused to produce it, as an individual can be fined. For the first offense, it's from $500 to $2,000. First offense. Second offense is $2,000 to $5,000. And this is a personal bill to you. It's not one that Dash picks up for you. So that's a good reason for being careful about denying information to the public. It's almost always better to err on the side of giving the information that, unless there's, really good reason not to. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions or.
So I think it's important that, since you mentioned that board members can receive FOIA requests, even formally, is
Yes.
who do those go to? Who is the person responsible? So we should then
So
be forwarding those
that's why,
to Beth, so that way she can, has training and can make.
Right.
How long do you have to keep these public records? Because it says it's governed by the Public Records Act, but
It depends on what kind of record it is. I don't have them on there. It seems like most of them are between 3 to 5 years. But I really don't go off the top of my head. Have y'all looked into that?
Yes, the retention policy, that, I don't know off the top of my head exactly what they are. But
make sure they conform
I
with
mean, the board materials, we maintain forever. So meeting agendas, minutes, materials provided are retained permanent. We know that. And that's probably the only thing that we would ever affect.
emails.
reader, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, usually the emails are emails with me, so I just retain them according to it.
Do the penalties that were outlined, do they apply to the notice requirements? So if you're not giving adequate notice or having a meeting in accordance with the public access requirements, what does that look like in terms of enforcement?
Well, it's the same thing. If there's a violation that the member of the public who's agreed, because it was an open meeting and proper notice wasn't given, or they did it in secret, they can get an injunction to get that change required to be done correctly in the future. We can call offending person, whether it's chair or executive director, whoever, then it has to be a willful and knowing violation. It's not just, people make mistakes all the time. And we're all, and we try to follow the rules. Sometimes we don't. You're not gonna be dinged for a mistake. If you have been told that you can't do this, and you do it anyway, and you know that it's wrong, and you do it anyway, you run the risk of getting fined. I don't really know the way to. That's about the best way I can explain it.
And I just have one other question. Sure. So just going all the way back to the top of email meetings and what could become an email meeting. It seems like there's this, it has to do with timing, like if you're, replying to an email in real time and it becomes a conversation, or there's a reply all function. So can you just give a little bit more color on what is maybe acceptable in email context?
Well, this is a really hard area because what is you can't have a virtual meeting. And not without giving proper notice to the public that there is a meeting. So, so the easy ones are, if I send you an email, and you respond to me, that is not a meeting. That's just two people. That's the same as if we talk, mode. But if we start around robin, and we're all talking, and particularly if everybody is, you have 6 people as board members in a conversation, and you're all replying to all, that is, I have no doubt that is a virtual meeting. The one that's close for me is if I send a message to A sends it to takes it and forwards it to B forwards it to C, and C to D, and then D back to me. That's close. It's probably better not to do that. It's better to keep your conversations with just one board member. I mean, that's what I would recommend, but I can't tell you absolutely that last example, I don't really know the answer. A lot of these things have never been tested and I'm not aware of.
Okay, but even in the sort of daisy chain example, that's where that temporal requirement comes in, where you're like, if that's happening pretty quick, then you're sort of in a virtual meeting. So I think the best practice is you just kind of, well, just avoid too much. Okay, that makes sense. A totally different thing. Yeah.
I mean, part of it is that the public wants the public's business done in public. I mean, that's the reason for the policy. So, they try to set the rules so that it doesn't prohibit 2 board members from talking to each other, but 3 board members can't get together and talk. And so, I think the better thing is not to do the daisy chain, because that looks too much like public business being done offline, which is, you're not supposed to do. Because the public needs, it undercuts, transparency and openness and government, which is a good thing. Anything else?
On the virtual meeting policy that we're circulating,
Yeah.
there's one other question that we were working on. I sent Josh, it looks like the city passes a policy, I guess there's a requirement in state code that, the virtual meeting policy has to be passed once a year. And it is our understanding that city council then does a blanket policy for all their boards and commissions. We were questioning whether we fell under that. I'm guessing, my suspicion is the answer is no. And that it would require us to pass every year. So that's something we'll ask you also to look into related. So that just so when we pass the policy, we know.
That the board is non-independent board, even though you have a big shareholder.
Yes. So I don't think we're in the boards and commissions chapter of the city. So we'll, so I think you have a copy of that ordinance that council passed. So we'll just ask you, are we covered by that? Or do we need to pass it around every year? And then we'll just put it on the schedule to pass it in September.
Sounds good. Well, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're gonna be retiring soon,
Well-
soon-ish, from council, so I do hope you'll come back and recognize you. Right, this is,
Well, I'm not going anywhere.
well, I know, but you've done good work for us, and so we want to properly thank you, but you're still working for us, so you're not gonna do it. tonight,
Okay.
but I hope we will get to see you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Take care, Lonnie.
Right, so we'll move into the CARES report, or maybe a decent time. We have one additional agenda item, which will come under the budget section, which is that every year the city manager circulates a letter. We ask boards and commissions for their budget priorities, and so we actually just got the letter yesterday. And so we're going to discuss what priorities we want to identify, and we have a copy of the letter from the manager and then what we sent last year. And we can walk through kind of what we need to do that's on there and kind of how we prioritize and update. So we'll take that up as part of the budget item. And does everybody have a copy, or am I the only one who has a copy? We all have copies of it, okay, of that. Okay, so you'll see that in front of you. And then and Josh will be talking about kind of our system. We talked a little bit about last with the times on them, and just to kind of continue to honor that. If we have not gotten to the capital project strategy by 7:15, I will ask staff to pull that. So just depending how our budget discussions go, because that's a really important discussion. We will have it in November. I just don't want it to be rushed. And we did kind of say that we would try to be out by 8 p.m. So we'll see how we're doing at that point. I know Pradine had asked some questions. I want to make sure we have enough time to go through that. It's with the amount of time that it deserves. So we'll see how we're doing. In terms of CARES report, I want to thank the Dash team for a wonderful record ridership event. I know a few of you were able to attend. Pradine was there. I met your son, and Adesha was there, and we gave some remarks along with Ross Simon, the chair of the Dash Advisory Committee. The mayor was in attendance. Councilman Aguirre, Councilman Bagley were there as well, and there were special Dash cookies made by Mary Beth's Bakery, a neighbor of Dash. And it was just a really festive event. It was interesting to have that also on the West End. We connected with a lot of riders on very busy line 35, and so it was really, really festive. And Josh, do you want to recognize those in your team who were part of, or tell us who put that event together?
Camilla's not here this evening, but she really led spirit of that. We were very proud of how it turned out.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize, I was not able to attend the rodeo and the company picnic. So I don't know if any of you were able to be there, but I know that's always a really spirited event. Who won the rodeo?
Well, now Glover won again. I don't remember the names of the other top four, but we were very proud of the turnout. It was a larger turnout than past, and fun event, and well attended. We had food trucks afterwards, a little mini award ceremony, and sweets and the ice cream truck. So I think all in all it went well. We're just continuing to try to build interest in it year over year, because it's often hard to get the drivers to come out, participate. One, they don't know about it. Well, we worked on that. Then they're a little nervous, understandably. It's a competition, and it's also on a Sunday, so but all is good.
Alex now advertised on their weekend event calendar, I noticed. So
Yeah,
you
we
hopefully
had
got some
food
notice to the
everybody,
public. That's
so we
great.
had some people come along.
Will we now go to the state rodeo again?
The top four will go to the state rodeo competition to be hosted by Fairfax Connector. I don't remember the dates of that, but we're also bringing back this year, as you all know, I'm the president of the Community Transportation Association of Virginia, and the 35-foot bus category, which was dropped a number of years ago from the competition. that our drivers asked about is being brought back under CTAV, and that will take place in Lynchburg, Virginia in the spring. Along with the paratransit rodeo. So we haven't quite figured out how that's gonna play out the first year for that, but we may send some drivers to that as well. We don't are able to go.
How did you do?
They didn't let me drive, but I will say that I moved the bus from one side of the building to the other, and then I was helping to park it, and our supervisor didn't tell me which bay to park it in until I driven past it, so I had to back up while all my drivers were watching. They all said I didn't know how to turn a bus, that's all. So I think I did pretty bad. Considering that was the one maneuver they wanted me to do, but otherwise, I was fine. I was on board judge though, and that was fun, so.
That's because if people, it's a Sunday, if I have you guys switch it to like Saturday,
Volume of service, primarily, I mean, I guess we could do it on a Saturday, we would have the same issue though. It's just the weekends, it was generally, it's impossible to do it during the week. So, I don't know, maybe we could try Saturday. Do you have a specific reason?
Full day of prep work is before, so to do that on a Friday.
Oh, yeah, that's good. There's a practice day on
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah, so the competition is Sunday, but the days in front of that, a lot of work being done, that's where all the operators practice and that's why it's Saturday.
I don't need to practice. If I compete, I don't need to practice.
Just in terms of policies, so mentioned that the virtual meeting, electronic meeting policy, which Lonnie will review, we will bring that back along with a slightly updated public comment policy, just to reflect a couple of changes that we had a new template for that policy. That'll come back likely in November. And then we're also working, thank you for the comments last month, and also spoke with Hillary about the kind of emergency correspondence policy. And so we've incorporated what we heard from the board into a draft, and we'll bring that back to get your review of it and see if we got it right. The other two, I think we'll be able to likely pass in November on the first try. That one we may need to have further discussion about, but we're moving along on those as well. And then I just also, since we have Hillary here tonight, and I know she'll go into her report, we have a vacancy on the Transportation Commission. We talked about that in the spring, and so I'm looking at Arish, who in either May or June had said, well, I might be willing to try it. So we haven't talked to you since then, but I would encourage, if you still want to, and again, try it, not to say I'm gonna do it, necessarily, but if you and Hillary could connect, so that way we can get you to one of the meetings. I was watching over the summer the discussion of the Metrobus network changes that they were doing, and there was a lot of discussion about Taney Avenue and sort of decisions that Dash made as part of their ATV. And so a couple of the members were like, oh, it'd be great if the Dash representative was here. So it's just a reminder to me that, we are sort of missing a voice in essentially the advisory committee on all transportation within the city. So if that's something you're still willing to try a meeting or two, and and then see how it goes. So
Yeah, let me connect with Lori to learn more. I mean, I'm a little stretched, honestly, like bandwidth wise, but let me try to see.
It's third Wednesday, and so it won't conflict with the city. And they need a city hall, right? They need a city hall.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll, I think you guys can talk, but we'll check in again in a month or two and see if we've made a connection. Otherwise, we'll make it appeal to the board again to see if we can get that built. That's all I have, so I'll turn it over.
Great, so I think, I had talked to Josh, and I know we're, trying a little bit of a new format with these meetings, so with the TVS report, I'm not gonna read through them. Next month, Josh will have the bullets, at least the titles on the screen. But, I think what we'll do is you all get that in advance, so if you have questions, this is how we handle it with a lot of our other boards and questions, kind of a written update. Feel free to ask me. The 3 topics were benches at bus stops, our transit website update, and then just a very short update on the kind of the DMV moves and what that is. So if anybody wants to talk about any of those, I'm happy to. If not, it was written in your packet and we can move on.
Thanks, Hillary.
Great.
And so we always have time for other board members who serve on boards, commissions, or groups and have, anything that would be for the benefit of the group. So open it up for other comments.
Something related to another board or commission, but I wanted to second what David said about the ridership record event and commend Josh and the team. It was just a really wonderfully done event. I'm really glad. It was on the west end in particular. It was across the street from the apartment building where my parents lived. My dad was a bus commuter in the late '70s before Dash existed. And I thought it was great to have a chance to meet some of the Dash, some of the DAC members who were there, and to have a little bit of like board and an advisory committee engagement. And they actually proposed that we have some type of joint, either mixer of social joint meeting, something like that, to kind of bring the groups together. And they seem really committed. And I know some of you know that kind of that group already. And I also thought it was great to have the city and community partners who are there with tables, including like our friends from the Office of Climate Action, where there's like a thematic tie between what Dash is doing and what those other city offices do.
And thank you for reminding me about the DAC comment. I got to speak, you introduced me to a couple of the DAC members, and Josh and I had a very long phone call yesterday, so we didn't about it, but that is something I think was some good ideas, and especially with the transition with the chair, as folks are interested, it would be great to have some ability to have, it sound like maybe a joint meeting, maybe, kind of a more informal, lighter agenda, just where we can kind of get to know each other and sort of understand some of the work they're doing. It was a great idea, and it's something I definitely want to carry forward as they get new leadership. And I think Kristen has heard.
Yeah, this is not really a traffic and parking board update, but maybe like a council update from the traffic and parking board. Just wanted to flag in case folks had not seen that the Bradley Center, King Street plan that the traffic and parking board recommended for approval to city council was approved by city council last night.
That's great news. It's great. Until we were chatting about that before the meeting started. It's very encouraging.
Figured everybody had already seen, but I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think that I feel like to the extent to team for putting together the celebration on the left side against our highest round of time. That's important for the activity. We have them for numbers, so the help there. And also for the bus video, let's put it again on Sunday. Putting it together and like that. You expand this year and we're doing the rest of the celebration is really great. I would like to have the fish fry back. The rest of the
Have the what?
the fish fry, maybe.
Oh, the fish fry.
I've thought for that.
We didn't. But we do hear that a lot. We want the fish.
Yeah.
So we're gonna find someone.
Putting that out there, but I did enjoy it. I see you guys like kind of, a little bit, but like. The operator. Here, gathering, celebrating. So this will probably work.
Thank you. Great kudos. So you guys did a good job of celebrations this past month. Anyone else? All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. The September minutes were in our packet. Are there any revisions to the minutes as they were presented? Is there a motion to adopt? So, second, all in favor?
Hi.
Opposed? Lori abstains. All right, and then Josh, do you want to handle the financials? Or Edward?
We don't have any financials at the moment. We're still working to get that information together. We have the city and those team has been short staffed, so we're just moving along and we'll bring them back as we have more.
And then we're going to talk about the MDTC Commuter Choice FY26 grant application.
Yeah, I mean, Martin's not here tonight. I can certainly just highlight, again, the materials in your packet. This is every 2 years, an application that's required for commuter choice funding, which is a reminder, is coming from the I-5 express lanes. It is, in the code and the agreement with the operator, which is, Transurban, thank you. Our past, award was $11 million over the course of 2 years. So we are applying, again, for the funding to continue the line 35 and line 36 AV. The resolutions are required as part of that application process. This is not a chunk of money that shows up in our budget. So, it's really important that we have this funding in order to maintain that service, which is, as Jason points out, is our most heavily used and most important corridor. So, welcome any questions. It's a pretty straightforward thing. We've done it year over year, it's part of the process. And your authorization through a motion would approve, Chair Kaplan to sign, those applications to the state.
I just-
PTC, sorry.
And I just want to mention, so 2-year cycle, as you said, and so those who are new to the board, we compete with our neighboring jurisdictions for this money who also provide very good projects. So last year in the spring, there was actually an extensive outreach campaign to riders, to other groups. The DAC, I know, did a letter, some of our civic associations served by these routes, because part of what the officials who serve on NPTC need to hear is that not just the numbers, but that there's broad community support and need for both of these services. So as we get deeper into this process, certainly it's something that we're going to want to be mindful for. And I look around the table, I see a lot of people who I know are very active on social media and have channels to connect with our community. And it's going to be really helpful for us to be part of championing that service because of just how much money this provides to some of our most heavily used service. So I just put that out there. It's something we'll talk about as we get deeper into the process.
We do 3 separate resolutions for motions, or is it all the way?
I think you can do them all as one.
Yeah.
But also if you don't have individual items.
Yeah, I think that's actually two resolutions. I think the
Right.
memo is, explaining. Are there any questions from members this week? Heard about, is there a motion to approve the interest application? Jesse, is there a second? Second, Garish, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Carries unanimously. All right, we'll move into the budget. I guess we'll start with that and then we'll do the priorities letter.
Passing around a document for your reference, it was not a part of the VAT report, I can apologize. It is the guidance from the city manager's office regarding upcoming FY 26 operating budget submittals. Just a quick reminder that this is the very, very early part of the budget process. And I don't know when you get your breath, but anyway. So at this point in time, what I'm presenting to you is proposed operating budget submittals for the budget process. Just a quick reminder, and Edward's actually going to talk a little bit about this in his departmental highlight about the budget process as a whole. That this is the submittal, and then we'll go through the process. We come back to where we are, make any revisions. The final budget is adopted late spring, in time, at least at the very latest of June meeting. This is what I know, and again, it's early in the process, but the letter that was submitted to the schools in the 3rd paragraph talks about operating budget, and it essentially states that with growth and the city's tax base virtually flat, we are very, very limited in the city's capacity to fund additional programs and services. The guidance here is no more than 2% over the current budget. That is impossible for Dash to do because our collective bargaining agreement mandates 4% year-over-year adjustment. And on top of that, when those rates move, they also move up in the scale. So on their anniversary, they move up in the scale. In a moment, I'm going to circle back and talk with you a little bit in my general manager report and highlight some of the challenges we've been having on the maintenance side. And you all received an email from me about a week ago highlighting some of the challenges that we're having. What is included in your packet are 2 scenarios. One is listed as the quote, recommended, and one as the fiscally constrained. In both scenarios, we don't get the 2%. We can't do that without pretty significant reduction. I did have an opportunity to speak with the city manager this morning, and we had a good conversation, sort of understanding the challenges in the process and the challenges the city is facing. So when it comes to what is different between these two, essentially the quote, recommended budget is one that addresses some fundamental things to maintain current services at the quality and expectations of our system, our standards that our customers. We talked last meeting, you heard from Mark a little bit about the challenges that overcrowding are causing and the schedule failures that we're experiencing. That is a daily issue, an occurrence. We understand that that is something that over time we're going to have to chip away at, but there is an effort to chip away at some of that here. This involves some strategically placed ghost buses and various other things that we typically do to supplement service and make sure the passengers don't get left behind. When a driver is severely behind schedule, it makes some schedule corrections. The other thing it does is it adjusts some minor staffing deficiency within maintenance. And when we talk in a few minutes, you'll get a better understanding of sort of what that means. Now, with that said, based on the guidance, it is my obligation to state to you and to reflect the fact that we're going into a really challenging process. And so fiscally constrained budget is put on the table in front of you for the purposes to get as close as possible to adhering to that. The challenges that are going to happen with the fiscally constrained budget are that we're going to continue to see the ridership affect our service quality. We're going to continue to see low on-time performance or lower downtime performance, more frequency of missed trips, and the continued crowding of buses. We are still doing things where we can behind the scenes to address overcrowding, i.e. in capital procurements, trying to find ways to buy more of the larger buses. We're strategically buying more 40-foot, still 35-foot buses. At one point, our fleet was almost entirely 35-foot. So those incremental increases do not result in increased operating expenses. So a 60-foot bus costs the same amount to operate as a 35-foot bus. So on the capital side, we can address some of these things. We can go into that. There is no one solution, one size fits all solution. There is no one little piece here that solves all of the challenges. But at the end of the day, the board needs to consider what our submittal is. The first submittal increases the budget by a little over 2.2 million or 6.4% for the total operating budget of just over 37 million. The alternative fiscally constrained brings that down to 1.8 million or 5.2%. There really isn't any way to get down from that except if you start putting cuts and reductions. And so again, considering that this is the current services submittal, as I mentioned, I spoke with the manager, he understood the reason that the submittal would be the way it is. And we're committed to working with the city and departments in the city to figure out ways that we can help to address some of these challenges and to avoid service cuts reduction. Beyond that, I won't talk too in depth about the individual line items. We really focus only on what is critical to operate. So there really aren't any things going on within this budget that build other programs or do anything internally or externally with Dash outside of what directly goes out on the street. And that is, as also you'll see in that presentation, over 3/4 of our budget is direct operating costs. So happy to answer questions. Oh, the last thing I will say is that many calculations are made based off of mileage. So when you see this second bullet here that says service mileage holds flat, essentially what we're doing is we're calculating our cost of operating based off of the mileage that we're operating at. And so if we did nothing different next year, ran the exact same number of miles, then our calculations would happen the exact same way. there's minor tweaks here and there, with this contractual related things, but ultimately, it's a very, very flat approach. This is also the last budget year of our current budget bargaining. So that would be the last time we have that 4% guaranteed, with no more income.
So we have to now give staff direction as to their submittal, and we have kind of two alternatives. And I think this will also then lead into the discussion about the priorities, because as we look at, you know, when we started the fiscal year, we talked about, okay, our top priority is, you know, beyond just maintaining service, and then next year, you know, beginning discussions of the future free fares, but you're gonna get into now having to look at things like the maintenance department issue. The trippers or ghost buses, as Josh calls them, super important. Josh and I were talking because I came over on a 35 and line 35, so it's the busiest route in the system, got on it, Ford Avenue, and rode it, you know, through Southern Towers and then here. And there were so many people on the bus that it was actually creating safety situation for passengers with disabilities to be able actually to alight in the bus, because there was nowhere for them to go when we pulled into Southern Towers. And that was even without even being able to pick up all the people at Southern Towers. But as I discovered when I got off the bus, there was a bus following behind it, actually one of our 60-foot buses that now was able to take the overflow. And so hopefully the rest of that route now, as people get off that bus and some passengers are getting on the other bus that's available. And I said, Josh, did they miss a trip? I mean, there were probably 40 people standing at Southern Towers. And he said, no, that's 5 o'clock on a weekday. And so, you know, we're gonna look at basically, you know, and to me, honestly, riding in the East End, where yes, we have crowded buses a lot, but we also have, you know, we don't have quite some of these capacity issues on a regular rush hour. So, you know, I think we have to be very mindful of what we put in, because it's likely the city manager is going to take that, and then everything else we're going to do is going to be then kind of working with council to try to get adjustments made. So I just want to kind of throw that out there into the conversation. And as we look at things that we want to say are our priorities, everything we take out of the base budget that we want to add back becomes a priority, and that shifts other things down in priority. So kind of start the discussion there, but welcome your comments or thoughts on this.
Josh, I'm just curious, like, do these two proposals factor in the current service issues, in the sense of, I know part of that's driven by like a shortage in maintenance staff and particularly overnight maintenance staff, as you noted in your letter. So, and that seems to be a problem that's been growing. I don't know what that looks like in terms of recruitment. You anticipate maybe needing to offer more, or get contractors or anything like that. So do both these proposals already factor all of that in, or maybe they pass negligible on the annual budget? Yeah.
So the proposed budget does work to address those issues.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it is comprehensive addressing all of them, because the approach has still been very conservative. You know, recognizing the challenges that are out there and that we're all facing. The approach was, let's try to solve for as much of the low hanging fruit as we can to get us in the right place. To give you a comparison, I'm going to talk about this, of course, in my update about maintenance, but essentially, we're looking to have a minimum of 19 technicians in maintenance. We have 17 positions. The minimum is 19, ranges between 19 and 22. I'll use this fact now. Today, as we speak, there are more members of the board than there are technicians working at that. So we right now have 10 active technicians maintaining 107 buses.
Someone has to switch.
But we know where the industry guidance tells us where we should be. We know where we are currently as far as what we have in the budget. So part of it is recruitment problem. We'll talk about that later. But the question of the number of available positions is in there. Now, We have followed the city's guidance year over year, and the city staff will agree with me that the guidance has always been, we can't add positions. But we have not been doing that, so that's also part of the other challenge here. It certainly is within the right of city leadership, and city manager to say, well, that's not current services, so you can't do that. The question that goes to the board is, do you factor that in submittal and current services, say we're solving that problem here? Or, as David pointed out, does that then get parsed out and become a supplemental request that navigates a different process? So we distribute two different. And of course, the service side is weeks, and Kristen sitting back there, I don't know how he figures it all out, but Kristen really, they work very hard to find the most efficient way to get the buses out there, move the people, and they're pretty much maxed out. And so they're looking for additional resources in place in the right places to ease some of that pressure and to help alleviate some of what David was feeling, but also most importantly, to schedule failures to go along with the buses. That overloading. Does that answer your question?
It does, I guess a follow-up is for both these proposals, are they, do both proposals assume 19, or is it going to the higher end of that range of 22?
No, the constrained budget doesn't change the number of.
At all, okay, got it, okay.
The alternative proposed or ideal budget, that's.
Not to put you on the spot, but let's say we don't do that. And I think you have insight, and so, we're trying to understand kind of the mindset of the manager. I mean, he knows what our collective bargaining, he knows we have 4% plus those step increases that are there, and so we're already working with that. So, as a board, if we take basically kind of go above his guidance and send the budget we said really is what we need, kind of, where does that land, is that?
So he's coming at this from a whole different perspective, which is when you look at our revenue projections for the coming year, the real estate tax base is doing, we've got about $10 million more than we had last year. Inflation was great for us from a sales tax perspective, from our interest on investments. That's all kind of quieting down. So that's his revenue side. On the expenditure side, when you factor in the collective bargaining agreements, the increases for the CIP for debt service. He's got like $30 million worth of costs. So he's 20 million in the hole on October 9th. And so that's the message for the schools was if everyone is in that 1 to 2%, and we all know the guidance that'll come out to the departments is going to be what can you cut? I mean, we're a little ahead of the game with your current services proposal has been before the manager has put out guidance of what we need to do in terms of reduction options, current service proposals, and any supplemental requests. And so because guidance other than to the schools and here's what you're looking for, it hasn't been given to the rest of us. I mean, he knows we're talking about this tonight. But basically, when the guidance comes out, we're essentially going to have to come back and produce either reduction options or something that is more in line with the, and it has to be discussed in the terms of what does 2% or 1% or 4% mean? What does it do to routes? What does it do to, and that's what tests will do. That's what finance will do. It's kind of, here's what we've got. So he's not gonna be surprised. I mean, then the board has to do what it's gonna do, but that's the overarching framework that's going on. And so no department has gotten our guidance target yet. That's what we were talking about today of how do we frame the reductions. There aren't any efficiencies left to do in the entire city of Alexandria. We've picked that clean. And so are there services where we're hitting the same population with a couple different things? And so do we look at that from offering less of the same thing? And so that's kind of how to go at this differently, because there is no more efficiency to kind of the overarching city story.
So same thing with some of the other departments that would have collective bargaining that are higher than the 2%. I mean, is everybody struggling with the same kind of conversation? Because we have to pay that, right? So like. How is?
So remember that, I mean. Police or fire, I mean, their whole budget is, you are so very personnel heavy, not all departments are that way. So your whole budget might be, gonna mess up this math, but $100 million, your personnel is 60 million, so if you can, your math isn't gonna be. Just because personnel is going up doesn't mean your whole is going up, but it does end up being where, I mean, this is gonna be a hard year. And we say that all the time, but there's really, last year with no growth in our real estate tax base. And that was really, really tough. And then the CIP is crushing. When debt service, we doubled our debt in 5 or 6 years. We're at 500, 600 million outstanding debt. Now we're over $1 billion. And so that debt service payment is now nearly, it's over 10% of our whole budget. That's in that can't move at all.
One of the,
Feedback, would you like to?
well, I was gonna say, I mean, is it not true that one option we could do is change our underlying fiscal policy around how much we put towards debt? Like, we have held a fairly conservative stance. I remember like 5 years ago, we rewrote that policy back, and we can't they essentially, like, I mean, the letter from the city manager in front of us says, you know, the council's adopted debt management policies, right? They could adopt different debt management policies, couldn't they?
Well, I mean, to borrow,
No,
Oh,
I'm forgetting the correct term of the ratio between what we're putting towards back into debt and its relation to the overall budget.
you might be talking about cash capital to the operating budget. We've already dropped that down to, it's just paying for the staff that are in the CIP and the IT plan. So we've gutted cash capital now. Where it's on the other side, it's the money we've already borrowed that we're having to pay back that limits how much discretionary money we have to put to other things.
One of the topics that came up at the last meeting, and I've long talked about, some of you have brought up with it, some of you have yet to do so, but is the topic of schools. And I can say it, I'm not beholden to the schools and I'm not on the city staff to deal with it, but reality is there are great opportunities in my view to find ways to leverage Dash's resources and help reduce what the schools are having to put out there on the road. This, to Kendall's point, is very early. We have to do this at this timing because then at some point, we don't know what's gonna happen, but usually between this meeting and next, the city goes, okay, we need something, we need the current services. So we're checking a box ahead of time, but I think there's a lot of work opportunity between now and the time we get back together in the spring, to talk about sort of where we landed. But I'm not gonna say it's not controversial. I'm gonna say I'm happy to be in the middle of controversy in that regard, if it helps to solve some problems. And I've expressed that my team stands ready to really analyze what's going on with school transportation. There's gonna be some push and pull to try to get that information in a way that we can actually come up with what are the solutions, but you know, in a theoretical situation that the schools are dumping, I don't know, $10 million into people transportation. And they just have to worry about one portion of their population, and that only requires $3 million, then free up a bunch of money. They could potentially be invested in Dash in a way that actually creates service that everyone can use, services to students, and might actually cost less. Because our overhead steps up a little bit over time, but we don't have to operate a whole other facility to run our service. We don't have to maintain a whole different set of buses, which is what they're doing. There's a huge stockpile of yellow school buses. And it's all the time sort of sitting in a parking lot. You know, there's ours is always empty, or you know, or we're struggling to make sure they're out there on the road. So anyway, my point is that I think there are some creative discussions that will be happening. And I'm interested in being a part of those, and whatever capacity that I can be, and maybe bringing them up, albeit they might not be popular in some situations, as ways that there could be leverage in it, moving some money. That's all.
Well, and Justin, I think it goes beyond moving money around that's already in Alexandria, which I would also be very interested in know if we got to a point that we were serving a sufficient number of students that we were considered like, student transportation agency. Could we then be eligible for some of the programs that let us buy electric buses, right? Yeah, right, because like, again, I don't know this well enough, but I would be curious to know if those programs are like, you literally have to buy an electric yellow bus from the Bluebird Company, or it's an electric bus that serves students, and if that's the case, that seems like it could be another really compelling place that we could find more resources that aren't currently in circulation in the city.
It's realistically, right, I mean, let's just say hypothetically, that's a solution that's everybody's on board with. City agrees, what does the model show in terms of that transition? Like, I would imagine that would take a number of years.
So it wouldn't happen, yeah, it wouldn't happen by this fiscal year. So it doesn't solve the immediate challenge, but I think that I'm sorry, to cut you off.
No, that's fine, I'm just,
So ultimately then you get to a point where we've got a plan. Maybe at that point, the city can start looking further ahead, because I know that Kendall's always looking way down the road, and the O&B team is looking way down the road, so you can start to see sort of where you're going, that in itself, to me, is a solution, because it gives you something to work towards, and you know where you're going, and the short term comes not so easier to solve, but you can find a way to solve it when we get to that solution.
Are there any other localities like similar in size and shape that are doing what you're talking about, that we can start to have people see how it's possible?
Yeah, I mean, DC is sort of different scale. But, there are localities in Virginia where people transportation is connected with transit, but they're still operating with transportation. There are also models throughout Virginia where the school system is contracted out in an effort to save money. They dump it off on the contractor. I'm not advocating for either of those particular solutions. Yeah, I mean, I think there are some examples of some things. We probably are the only jurisdiction in Virginia, if we went this route, that would say students above a certain age ride public transit, period. Instead, the other localities have looked at ways to fold people transportation under public transit. Admittedly, probably because schools are really good at educating students. That's their primary mission. That's what they know how to do. That's the experts. We're experts in transportation, right? And so I think in some ways that was an alignment to say, like, let's put all the transportation stuff on the experts and sort it out that way. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but those are some of the.
It was more just for people to start to see how this can be done. I think it's it can be jarring to anybody. What do you got? It's gonna be right. So just helping to even see, we're not talking about your first grader.
Well, and I think, just to, well, not up, right, like in Arlington, I think it's Arlington, maybe Fairfax, they're paying for the students are free on Pomona, so like that was a budget question last year, that's something we could continue to explore. I was surprised that the cost was not as high as I thought it would be, and even to start getting more of those students and looking at the Wilmata routes in conjunction with the DAF routes and overlaying ECPS, because that for us pretty great with middle school next year.
Let Doug first.
Yeah, I just want to put another plug and express my support. And I think that even though, implementing, should everybody get on board and agree with something like this, will take some time. I think now is exactly the right time to push on this. Just looking at it from the school side, ACPS is in the early phases and will over the next year be doing their next major redistricting to take effect fall of 2026. And bus transportation and like where those lines are drawn, and potentially then if we could get some sort of synergy between Dash and the school transportation system, like that could really come into play to help draw those bus boundaries, those school boundaries, at least at the middle school level, in a way that's gonna make it more effective to sort of consolidate and kind of put things under dash at a rather than sort of having two full transportation systems. So I think I would just encourage and express my support of really actually pushing those conversations as much as we can, like now, actually, to do that because I am pretty engaged with the school board, and I constantly hear back when there's real issues in the schools that they just can't do anything about it because transportation is such a challenge. And so I think the moment is more than ripe to really not be afraid to just push forward with this conversation.
And number four, I know we just got the memo for the schools, but number four on page 2 about the school CIP is the strongest language I've ever seen that the manager has taken in terms of schools need to work with Dash. And, so it gives Josh, I think, an opening then to come in and say, let's have that conversation.
Exactly.
I guess they're supposed to do 6 million in next year for their transportation facility upgrades. And he's saying, well, that we're gonna postpone that and you should talk to Dash about what they can. So. But they can't force the district.
Does anyone understand what he's alluding to, like, given the sort of age segmentation for appropriateness of independently riding a transit bus? I'm assuming this is more for high school, maybe middle school students. So, like, what's the scenario in which ACPS could move away from having buses at all? Because that seems to be the step change in terms of the fiscal benefit of what he's proposing. Otherwise, you just have sort of fixed costs shared over a lower size system. And lower volume school bus system. So is he assuming we still have school buses for elementary, or is he assuming something else that I haven't imagined?
I'm not sure that there's any sort of assumptions going on as much as just to say, like, have a conversation with the experts about for what you're doing. Is there a way that we can ease some of that pressure? My vision is, to your point, that we would identify those populations that would require that transportation. And there would be a great solution for that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the school system, maybe it's a contract, maybe it's, maybe someone runs it, but Dash helps with some maintenance component, we keep up our maintenance, right? There's a variety of solutions. I think in my view, that there's a real opportunity to overlay question of like, where are the schools going to pick up students and dropping them off? Where is there already Dash infrastructure? Where are the pieces missing? It's their mind that can fill in those gaps. Does expanding the implementation of the ACP help to accommodate some of those populations? You look at areas like DC does not provide people transportation except for students who have special needs or otherwise mobility impaired, have some sort of condition that prevents them from riding transit. So it's a much smaller scale of operation. To your point, they're still operating at some level of plus somewhere shape or form. I think that kind of gets the scenario of looking at other localities about how you handle that piece. Is there a more efficient way to do that too?
Also, one more thing, we've been trying for a long time to get, there are certain locations where they are busing students within a mile of the school because there's some safety issue with an intersection or something, but we've never gotten. Like, we would love to know where are those locations so we can go out and see if we can make this route safer and make it walkable, and now you don't have to run a bus because now there's a sidewalk or we've done something and we've really struggled to get that information about what those exact locations are and why we're not. It's been a challenge.
Okay.
So in terms of bringing back to the budget discussion, so we have the two approaches that we can submit. I mean, we haven't gotten our guidance, but we kind of know what, based on this, where it's going to fall. But how do you want to, and then, shifting, if we go constrained, what gets shifted over into the supplemental potentially? Yes. So what's the
I'll voice a preference for the recommended budget. I mean, if we know that we are going in quickly over where the city manager would like us to be. I'd rather just show what it is that we actually want, rather than sort of like pre-compromise and then end up having a compromise further from that. And candidly, I think there's power in sort of being very transparent about the resources that we need. You know, I think in conjunction with this, back to your anecdote about Rover that I did, like, I think if we have not yet invited the city manager to do a ride for either building or staff on that route at rush hour, and same with members of city council, I do think trying to have this be less numbers on a page and more like actual experience of what the service looks like and how many people. You know, I have been struck that there is still this myth that like no one's using the dash buses, and I think seeing, you know, that level of ridership would be a very powerful compliment to why we are having to ask for funding. So I would like to see it quickly.
All right, I support that. Others? And I think, you know, and the city manager understands the structure that we are the board of directors of everything. So, you know, Josh will indicate if we go that route, you know, he's fulfilling them. But we have said, you know, we understand the guidance and your, of course, Vanessa letter that goes there that expresses why we took the action. Is anyone who feels different? Were you guys? Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Is this an action item tonight? Is the action item to tell Josh to move forward with developing the recommended?
Yes,
No,
yeah, we need something to move forward so that when it's developed.
And I guess to what Kendall said earlier, it's possible they would then come back and say, you need to cut X percentage of your budget. That's when we get into kind of, okay, this is the sort of, that's how we got the 104 last year, essentially, going to that, we had to reduce our budget by this much. So, and I guess that, it sounds like timing wise, we could be asked to do that in November, but we're not.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly, there's nothing that prohibits us from getting feedback and rediscussing this. Yeah, that's totally fine too, right? We're just trying to, from a staff perspective, we're following the calendar and sort of prepared. Boy Scout, so we're prepared, but we can always adjust if we. I also apologize, I didn't put the slide up, but it is included, we do this. We've really been analyzing like what is the city paying to operate Metro Bus in the city. We did isolate that out, and we have one for the Metro budget, so you can see that the, all that said, we're significant for this. Thanks. Just,
Have you ever seen this kind of benchmarking for ACPS transportation?
no, but I think that's what we should do.
I'd love to see
that. For sure.
Do you know what percent, I guess we probably don't, what percentage are riding our buses, say at the high school level versus are getting on a yellow? So this ACBS, does they report their ridership? They probably don't count, they don't have counters like we do on their buses, so that would be really interesting to know, like, are we covering more than half the, you know, the existing population or others?
I'm gonna start knocking down the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, so given that this letter went from the city manager to the superintendent a couple weeks ago, have you guys followed up yet, or do you intend to follow up to say like, hey, you know, we're aware this conversation is taking place, we'd love if you could provide us with data about your number of buses, your number of riders, the routes that you're on. I think my impression is that like, we don't really have that, right? Like, they have not been super forthcoming about sharing all that. Right?
That's Josh, just remember what Lonnie said, that's an information.
Yeah, so it's a little.
We had just FOIA ACPS.
Yeah.
Right.
They're totally involved. Once they can't give details about their infection routes around the state of children, are they safe to school restriction?
Exactly.
We amplify that every year. So that doesn't make sense. Doesn't the city have a subcommittee meeting coming up? Or a committee meeting going?
John, you know, before I left the DAC to join the board, the DAC had appointed a student member representative to the board. I'm wondering if there's any ability for that student to facilitate as a DAC member, you know, with the school administration with gathering information. It's maybe a shot in the dark, but
I think, we'll definitely take note of that and sit down with Zach and try to strategize. I think everything that happens here tends to slow down, so we're able to then have that conversation. So here's the conversation, now more level, have a more on the boots in the ground conversation and figure out.
So we can take a motion to send the budget up. I would just say one other thing that we also talked about, I mean, council will have their budget retreat probably end of November, and then we'll issue guidance. So the manager might, you know, for example, they might say something about transit service in their guidance to the manager that could, you know, essentially bolster our case if that's something that they want to put in. We know we get a lot of, well, obviously we have a very supportive council, but we know we get questions, inquiries sometimes about, you know, essentially some of the situations like I saw tonight about the overcrowding on certain routes, and understanding, you know, that, you know, certainly coming through last year, we understood there was a lot of support from council keeping the transit service that we had, the level 4 restoration was not controversial for that. So, you know, it's something that we also can, you know, try to lobby as well to explain our needs as this process goes. So is there a motion to adopt the current services budget as our submission? Second, Jesse, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Any opposed, any abstentions? Same, two abstentions. Thank you. And then we also have to the budget priority letter. So this is the letter that went out from the city manager. Those of you who serve on other boards and commissions got something similar, just as basically, you know, kind of where the city stands, and then what are some of the things that he's looking at. Okay, what can we do? You know, where should we invest? And then I want your ideas. And so last year we had a letter that went up with our both operating and then CIP priorities. And I don't know, Josh, if you want to address those, I mean, I think a lot of the operating priorities are pretty straightforward, and then when we get into service, I think, you know, we're going to suggest that we take a little bit different strategy to how we kind of push on line 32, which is mainly segmenting down into looking at the cost of each segment. When you say, oh, you know, we want $850,000 and this is priority 3, it probably doesn't go very far. But when you start to look at it and say, well, you know, the anticipated increased ridership would be this many riders per hour if we took the midday, weekday up to from 60 to 30, or this would be the increase we took the Saturday. I think then we can prioritize those segments based on what the increased ridership is and ask for something that might be more digestible. But I'll ask Josh if you want to maybe summarize some of the priorities, especially on the CIP side, so that we can decide if we need to kind of tweak these. You know, we kind of just added this yesterday, so it's something
I mean, I think that what would be really helpful is just for the boards to look at what he said last year. And if the theme is the same, and you feel like that is reflective of the feedback that you want to give, then we can work on wordsmithing the document, figuring out, I would want to give Martin the time to look at it. He's out right now, but be able to put that together and say it in the right way. To me, it is always most critical that we focus on physical repair and current services. Mantra is, we got to do tomorrow what we did today. That's what we're here for. If we can do it better, that's great. But
you know, the trippers have become, I think, a more urgent issue as ridership has continued to set new records month by month. We don't, you know, last year we didn't feel the need to explicitly address that in the letter. Do you think that should be an operating priority, a separate operating priority, or folded into one of these?
I think that would be quoted as any measure that is focused on service reliability. I would not go as detailed as to call exactly what that is, what that looks like, but because that's something we would put forward as a budget perspective, we would say this is the cost, and this is sort of a description of what those things are. I think in the letter, rather than focus on stating that service reliability is the priority, and then let the dash team to break that out in a more specific way in a different document. Again, we're happy to work that in here if you'd like, but
Yeah, I'm just looking to see, actually, I don't know, say things that get around reliability, but I actually don't know, I don't see in the document that we ever actually said reliability in the number one, maintain current service level. So would you just bold reliability, current service with the same reliability that we have?
Ensure reliable service, meaning current service level.
Okay. I would be fine with that. And then, as I said, for, fare free, we can have as number two. It is the first year that council can make decisions about the future of fare free, although understanding, those who are on the board when we adopted fare free, they can't just flip a switch and it goes, because then we're no longer participating in a smart trip licensing. Fare boxes are going to start to come off buses. I actually don't know if are we ordering them on, we're not even putting them on newer buses. So there's a ramp up period. So council actually would be constrained what they could do for FY 26 if they decided that they didn't want to be fare free because of our,
Yeah,
it's 2 years that we told them they would.
You have to come up with between $7 and $9 million worth of capital investment.
So I mean, we certainly can keep it in. Do we need to make it? I guess I was asking in the context of whether that needed to be as prominent a priority as, because I think we had, I think the intention was last year that these appeared in the priority order that we wanted them to consider. So maybe we put fare free even below the service, because it's unlikely that council would be able to, because of the cost, associated with them transitioning back. Is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, because fare free at this point is already baked in the base budget. This is the first year you're operating without any grant funding around fare free. So the only way that would come up is if someone said, well, use fares to plug X gap. And we already have the answer for what the investment is necessary to accomplish that. And I've got no impression to anybody that was intended doing it. So certainly, I think that could not necessarily be a priority, just to say that that's part of what our current services are.
Okay, so maybe we don't even need number 8, number 2.
Right.
So we could potentially take number 2 out entirely, and this, we could maintain current service levels is broad enough to the fares, and then move 3 up to 2, but then emphasize, like we did say, investments in line 32, particularly important, but I think we want to spotlight line 32 and then indicate what are the 1 or 2 segments that are most impactful of the 6, still where we have the 60 minutes, and that's where Martin's and Al's. I mean, we have some time before the letters due. All this our last board meeting before. Yeah, because I think the letters due November 1st. So, but the staff would have time to do their analysis.
And I think what you did last year is the board approved the approach, drafted a letter, they could send that out in email to ask if anybody had any tweaks or edits, comments. And then we assumed that with that being the case, that we were okay to move forward to finalize the letter. That was the important thing last year.
Yeah, so I mean, we could just, this chart could basically be the line 32 broken down by segments as top priority, and then 31 and 34 beneath it. I think it's maybe an older version, so line 30, that's fine now.
Yeah.
And then the CIP, priorities, I think are all things that we still feel strongly about. And then the paragraph below is just kind of the bus stop safety and accessibility as a continuing concern. I think the city has now applied for the trip money, grant funding to support interim improvements and landmarks, so we can adopt that paragraph to reflect the current reality of where we are. Does this make sense to folks? In terms of that approach, does anyone want to? Any comments and things
Are
like that?
half the stops still inaccessible for those with challenges, Josh, or are they correct?
Yeah.
You got a presentation.
Oh, okay.
We can adjust, though, we can take out the specific, so we know that there are still many stops that require improvements, but the city is working creatively to address that, and I think that's, we just want to, we always like to have that in there as an kind of ongoing concern, but also to recognize that there are good things that are happening. We want to see that continue where funding is required, sometimes, to pour a concrete pad or to add street furniture, that there's money for that has to come from somewhere. We just want to make sure that continues to be prioritized. Okay, so we can, so we have a concept, and then staff will have time to circulate the letter with the priorities, and then we can accept edits, we can accept changes to that letter up until the last week of October to get that in on time. So we can can go ahead and the motion would, I think, be to authorize sending a letter that encapsulates that updates the priorities as per the board discussion. I think that should be the step. They're taking good notes and I'm reporting to the so people be able to go from there. So if that works, I'll take a motion.
Sorry, you said you were moving number 2?
On the operating priorities, we were gonna include, because that's already baked into the current level budget, we didn't, as to whether that needed to be its own, bullet item, and also recognizing that the city would have to come up with $7 to $9 million if they wanted to start their collection again. We can leave it in there as a standalone if that, and that's something, we need to kind of understand feedback. If that is something that we need to address separately, we should do so.
Why do you remind people that we want to be fair? So just to centralize that, service, then consider every dollar in the city, people that use that program, so like how the perspective or another sector of their next time, their Arlington. And so they're free, not just the bottom line, volunteer. It doesn't have that cost, but it's that we've got, so I would like to. Just to re-emphasize their free. Have that, so my city comes here, so that we are.
Okay. Okay. That's all right. Maybe we can include the comments about the sentence about what the cost would be to implement collecting the fares. I mean,
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
Well, we can say something to the extent of recognizing not only the benefits of fair free service, but the substantial investments necessary in order to collect fares, like far else often says to them, benefits from probably.
But I move it down to 3 if the idea was to.
I would recommend, since I think it's unlikely that that's going to change, and we want to spotlight the service improvements, because that's where we really, probably, and that will likely end up just being something to lobby, next council on. Are you okay with that? Okay. So is there a motion on the priorities? Okay, so through the letter as per the board discussion. Update priorities. Second, okay, move Harish, second Matt, any further discussion on, not all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, passes. And we have a discussion on kind of a departmental debrief, or do you want to take up the oh, I'm sorry, we're going to move into the maintenance program first, or?
Yeah, so just continuing along, I can probably do my general manager report, and I can make sure that I'm briefly touch on the main points that are important to cover here, and then again, reminder that the departmental highlights and capital projects are always something that can be deferred to another meeting. So
Yes, I think at this point we're past 7:15, so we'll say the capital projects we will postpone. But do you want to? I didn't know with the we need to talk about the maintenance issues because I think that's very current. But the fiscal budgeting process, just because of the discussion we just had, if you feel that you'd like to do that tonight, or if you want to, so I'll leave that to you to decide.
we can see where we are based on what the is going to be for you. So again, thank you all for your patience. As I mentioned a week ago, I provided you an email just alerting you to the potential that we were going to have some service impacts that we were going to have to implement in order to address the shortage of available buses to provide that service. The good news is that hasn't happened. So that message to you was really a preemptive effort to get ahead of any uncertainty that we were facing. Recognizing that under no circumstances does my team ever take the position that we're going to sacrifice safety in order to get service. So if there's a situation where we have vehicles that are down for any matters that affect safety, we're not going to run them, and with that means we run out of buses, we run out of buses. So on a high level, an understanding of where we are, our maintenance department maintains 107 bus fleet. It operates 3 shifts, so it's essentially close to 24 hours a day. We have both technicians and service workers. Technicians are the people who do the actual mechanical work on the buses, and we have 3 classes, A, B, and C. So an A technician is going to be your highest paid, most skilled technician, and who's going to do the most complex work. And from there it trickles down. It's gonna be, more base level kind of skill set. Their compensation is determined by our collective bargaining agreement. They are paid in a similar way to bus operators, whereby when they're hired at a particular position. They start at the bottom of that grade through their year-over-year increases, they reach seniority. Their work is also assigned in that same method. So when a technician joins Dash, they are the last on the bid. And what that means is that our newest person gets paid the lowest of the entire team. And often has the pick of the least desirable work. So they end up paid the lowest of everybody, and they often are the ones that are asked to work overnight. That sets us up for a real challenge. It puts us in a place where when we're recruiting someone, we don't have the ability to be super attractive to them as far as employer. Especially if in the private sector or in another industry, they can make more or have a more desirable schedule. That's not to say that we aren't successful in hiring technicians. We are able to do that, and we do very aggressively work to do that. The team has continued to ramp up, and since Yvonne has joined our team, has brought incredible number of new ideas, ways, and techniques that we think would recruit people. If you ever really want to get in the weeds and learn about that, she's wonderful. She will be back in future months to talk about those processes, but needless to say, we have a pretty comprehensive strategy here to try to tackle it. With all of that said, we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have 10 technicians actively working in Dash. There are 11 board members, so that gives us some context with next year. 13 positions are filled. So we have 3 people out long-term for various matters. We've had a number of retirements recently, but our people who are out right now also happen to be some of our most skilled people. On top of all of that, we have a fleet that is very complex. We have everything from hybrid electric diesel buses to traditional diesel buses to electric buses, articulated buses, and everything. So we've got a lot of different things going on. And essentially where we're at is that we don't have enough people to keep up with the work. And we don't have enough money to farm out the work in a way that necessarily would keep us caught up. So we have to be very strategic about the decisions we make related to outsourcing work. One of those examples of those decisions is that right now we have 4 buses in our fleet that are down, dead, because they each require $60,000 to fix. That's $240,000 worth of money that needs to be put into those 4 buses to get them running. They are 2 years from retirement. What do we do? So the team is considering these things. We've got somewhere up in the area of 2 buses that have bad engines. So engine replacements, $45,000. Age of the bus, does it make sense? We're going to spend that money. None of this is from PM related issues, preventative maintenance. This is all about just failures that occur on these vehicles. The more complex the vehicle, the more costly. And we don't have the capacity to service hybrid vehicles in our shop, nor do we have the capacity to service electric vehicles. Meaning we don't have a crane, we don't have overhead protection for walking on the roofs. That was never designed in the facility in the first place. So we've got a lot of constraints. With all that said, I will say the team has been doing an incredible job. And frankly, the reason this snuck up on us is because they've been doing such a great job. And they haven't been complaining about it. Now, the team in place, our leadership team, championed by Stephanie, who took over as COO, I don't know how long ago, it feels like yesterday, has been really heavily involved in this and setting up the leadership team within that department. It is relatively new. Don Lenoka was our previous director of maintenance. He retired. We had a gap in period of time. We had a recruit as director of maintenance. She's doing a great job. She's had to hire her supervisors and, her maintenance manager and deputy. All those positions turned over. So here we go with a lot of leadership kind of turnover. And the good news here is that that leadership has been right there next to the technicians figuring out what's going on. And so we reached a point a couple weeks ago where we realized what was going on. Not that we didn't know there was a challenge, but where we were at the time. So that's where Stephanie and her team sat down and said, this is where we are, right? And we're not going to make a decision that's going to impact the safety of our system. We're not going to make a decision that puts our workers in a bad place. We're going to figure out a solution, but that solution is going to take time. So that's kind of how you saw an answer to an inquiry, previously submitted by Steve, of like, where did this come from? We didn't hear about it last month, why? And that's a lot of the reason. But going forward, we're gonna keep you very actively updated with where we are and how we're progressing with this. So I will own the fact that we could have been saying something a little earlier, and that's on me to say, hey, like, what's up? We think this is kind of gonna get tricky and dicey. But we've got a plan in place. We are bringing in some contracted work, technical folks who can train the technicians on some of these major repairs. So, for example, when an engine needs to be built and whatnot, we're bringing ovens and manufacturer. We're putting our techs on that to understand how that gets done. So we're also doing some professional development along with fixing the buses. We're sending a number of them out for repairs. As I mentioned earlier, our recruitment strategy is this is where all of our resources are focused right now. Is recruiting and bringing the best talent. And we would like to get to a point where we have the required minimum number of technicians to maintain the fleet. So I'll wrap this up by saying what happens is that if a bus has a failure or fails a PM or is unable to be got to, it ends up on what's called the deadline. And when the deadline grows to a certain number, then operations doesn't have that bus to use, it's locked out of operations. So then they have to send the driver out, and where you get a missed trip is when that driver's sitting there saying, I'm ready to go, and downstairs, there's nothing. It's just what's on the deadline, that those buses can't go out. So we have to either wait for one that's coming in, swap that out, or wait for maintenance to release a bus from the deadline, which they do. The other thing to understand about the deadline is those buses that are on that deadline could have a repair that takes 8 or 10 hours. And then there are 2 buses that have repairs that take 2 hours. So now we've got to figure out like which buses do we work on, right? Let's do those 2 that just have 2 hours. Well, that 8-hour bus now sits there another day, and then another day, and then another day. So the other strategy is like, hey, can we chip that off? So we're going to be spending some money related to that. The challenge on the budget is primarily going to be related to overtime, which we hope will be short-lived while we get the recruitment process in place. We have opened that up. Technicians are taking that. Interestingly, our maintenance department isn't as proactive about overtime as operators are. They're kind of like, oh, we're done, we're going home, which is fine. But we are offering them that. We do have our 3rd shift supervisor in place. He's awesome. He's working really hard to do what he can with that shift. By the way, that's also when all the buses are there. So we don't really have enough people on that shift. We don't have the best people, the most qualified people. So now our best people are in the shop and the buses aren't there. But anyway, we figured that out. That's how we get it done. But between the overtime and then investing in some of these large repairs that are high dollar, we're going to be looking at strategically doing those and then figuring out sort of how we move forward from that, get the bus back, it's repaired. Okay, can we extend the bus's life? What are the things that we can do? So I'll stop talking and welcome your questions. I just wanted to take that time to talk through and talk to you all.
Does the contract have a nighttime shift differential or anything like that?
Yes, there is a shift differential.
And that's still not bringing the overnight.
I mean, we do have some overnight people, but it's not that significant. Yeah. The other thing is our tech is, well, is it a model that you looked at it or?
Yeah, it's a little, well, I would say significantly under, market in this area. As well as when you look at like what Transdown pays, it is significantly less.
How many buses are we down?
Well, the last update I had was Hubbard still in the same area. Hubbard's around 30.
Below 30.
Down 30? I mean, it kind of reminds me of when we had the metro shutdown, we brought in more buses. Was there a way to do a short-term type of lease or get an older bus or two like you did in 2019?
Yeah, we definitely talked about that. The challenge with that is that it compounds the problem. Those buses that we bring in still have PM requirements. And so
Do they lease? No, can you know, do a short term?
potentially, I think probably as we continue to chip away at this is, while it's not brand new, like where we are right now is very new, and so we're still kind of figuring out the details. Is the potential to bring in more of that external talent to, we don't want to replace jobs, we're not getting rid of our techs, we're not giving away their work, but rather to get somebody who can do it. Get that tech with them, and not only are we paying for a repair, but we're getting training time. So we're kind of maximizing the use of our dollars. But adding to the size of the fleet, it's just more complex, in this situation. We're also larger than we were when we did that shutdown, so we're already exceeding the capacity of our building. Which is creating a bit of a logistical challenge.
There's also, oh, of course,
How many positions are open?
So if we have, 17, right now we have 13. So we have 4. But again, we have 3 that are occupied by who we call long-term, short-term disability. We can't. Do it. So we really should be, ideally, at minimum, we should be at 19, and today we're at 10. We're down 9 people. Very.
Sorry, that didn't add up. So 13 are filled, 4 are open, like, which is the 17. What's the 19?
19 is what we have identified based on our fleet size is where it should be.
Oh, got it, okay.
We only have
We have
17
budget
positions.
Okay, got it.
That gets back to the discussion for years. We were adding service, but then not authorized for new positions, so we weren't putting those into our base budget request.
Now, previously, 2 of those 17 were frozen positions. So we've unfrozen those, and we're working to pursue those, but that also was factored.
When were those on, how long, when did you,
They've been frozen since last year,
okay, oh, so they're coming into the budget year,
so
so
they
it
weren't
wasn't,
being actively recruited for.
okay, they weren't multi-year present positions, they were, you identified those as needing efficiencies.
this actually goes back to the question I think what I was confused about before. When we're talking about the current budget proposal, that's aiming for just 19, right? Not the 22, that's kind of the home run.
Right,
Okay, got it.
right.
Okay.
Under no budget proposal do we have 22.
Okay, yeah, sorry, that's right.
We know that the minimum standard for our industry based on our fleet size is 19. I think that if we get to 19, we're still gonna have some work that we contract out strategically. And I think also the reality of our facility has allowed us to do certain kinds of work. I think that's part of the strategy, but yeah, long term, Stephanie would sleep a lot better at night if she had one too. But I think if we can get up there and we can catch up, and the other thing to understand again is that the leadership restructures that we put in place over the past 6 and 9 months are setting us up to not have this problem the same way in the future, right? And that is very much, we had a proactive strategy getting that in place to make sure we got where we could be. And that's already showing some of the benefits, which is why we haven't seen, some of the reasons we haven't seen complete service failures like we've been concerned we might have.
And then I was also curious, like Matt was about leasing, but what I was wondering was if you were to adopt a leasing strategy at all, in part, what are the costs associated with wrapping, or I guess I should say, what are the costs, but are the costs associated with wrapping buses or whatever else you need to take a lease bus and put it in operation, are those costs significant?
Not so much. I mean, we probably wouldn't necessarily wrap the buses. We did something like that. We'd probably have some stickers we stick on the side. That's all day. We do have some contingency buses that are not a part of this 107, and some of them are actually left over from the 2019 project. They're, I mean, they're not buses. We like to run regular service. They're tired.
I saw one once. I mean, the seats were different than.
Yeah, they're tired.
Didn't you want to museum in New Jersey?
Sounds like we could use.
But yeah, I mean, we do have a small contingency. And I do apologize. I missed one point that is also potentially going to help us in the next coming months. We have 7 Proterra electric buses in our fleet. 4 of them have been dead for over a year. So just dead, because Proterra went bankrupt. We had to wait for the bankruptcy to go through. They dropped all their support. They dropped all their people. We couldn't get parts. There are open warranty campaigns, recalls, recall campaigns on those buses that cannot be run. So just yesterday, we had a meeting with them. I sent a nasty email today to them. Stephanie is ready to have them come in the office and she's gonna beat them up. And we're telling them, like, we need to be here next week. You've got to fix your 4 buses. So we can get them back on the road. Like, seems like a small amount compared to 107, but that's a chunk of vehicles that we can't even do anything.
With their bankruptcy, so how are they gonna be able to do it?
Well, they were bought. I mean, Phoenix.
Oh, they were bought.
Phoenix bought the bus side.
Would a Proterra tech like to come work for Dash instead of working for Great Bank?
Well.
Maybe bring your friends.
Maybe. A lot of them jumped ship a long time ago. Sorry, Jen.
About like opportunity output and output. You also have the matter of really can't handle certain buses, like really. So like, how do we take care of that?
We do outsource them, in some cases, like, so the hybrid buses. Those 4 buses that I mentioned need $60,000 worth of work. So they'll be sent, they would have to be repaired offsite because it has to happen with the battery pack having the bus. And we don't have a crane in our facility to do that. That would be an example of a place where we would contract out the work.
We don't have 4 hybrid buses.
No, we have 4 that are dead. We have half the fleet is hybrids. Yeah, almost half the fleet at one point was hybrid. It's coming down because we stopped purchasing hybrids a number of years ago, and as we moved toward electrics. But yeah, so, and this failure point is a common one. What DPIM stands for, but as long as I've been in the industry and I've had hybrid buses, DPIM has always been the thing that I hear has failed. No, these are.
We're sorry,
That's good answer.
that's just, we have currently 4 hybrids that we've confirmed they can, so like $60,000. That's not a regular time, but that's once in a lifetime, report that's specific to hybrid. We just currently have 4 that are in, we'll have to decide whether it's worth the $60,000 investment per asset, knowing the time.
So what if we on average spend a year for outsourcing?
I can get, for outsourcing,
Yeah, but
we can get you that information. I think what I do want to talk about related to outsourcing, we usually do about max 4 buses at a time, because we have, limited vendors to use in our area, like we're using some of the Baltimore right now. Because that's the closest as far as some of the options we have for setting up the stuff. The problem with outsourcing work is that we're not their number one. We're one of many people that's in your queue, so they may put restrictions on us that you can send you pieces of equipment and we fall apart a month. You know, and we get you a diagnosis and then it's So it takes longer to outsource. If you're interested in a figure of how much you spend on it.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful to me understand how. I'm clear on that, and then going back to recruitment, if the high school has like a. Mechanic program, are we talking about including high school? If the
Yeah,
kids possibly as like maintenance mechanic, is that in the figure?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's to the point of, that I mentioned earlier, the strategy that Vaughn is using, and I really want to get that presentation to you all, we'll go through all of those various pieces. The one thing I will say is that, and as many of you know, I'm very invested in professional development, both current staff and current people in the industry. One of the challenges is that we can get C mechanics all day. What we need is A mechanics. Today, we need A mechanics. So we can bring a student in, we can bring them through. They can't do the work that we're struggling with. And I think that has been another part of the thing, part of the challenge that was set up with this. So it's not to say we're not actively pursuing that, because we are. As far as the short term is concerned, though, where our recruitment efforts are really focused is on A's, because that's where we have our biggest deficit, and that's what's causing us. And I apologize, I may have introduced some general kind of, I'll through a lot of numbers around here. What I was trying to get at when I was talking about outsourcing was just sort of where we are today, the bunch of vehicles that we have sitting in the garage right now, but we haven't been doing it that need to be outsourced. But I wouldn't say that it's like, just Stephanie's point, it's a recurring kind of thing, but your point is important, well taken, in the sense that I think that's a big part of our strategy. We're also looking at veterans, we're looking at variety of people that may be coming out of other industries, from service and that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. So that's you're right in line with sort of our thinking and what we're trying to do.
And Josh, I assume sort of not all of these managed institutions are created equal, which is to say, if we resolve the Proterra bus problem, does that sort of like unkeep the whole, lacking supply? Like, if we got those 4 buses back online, back to a normal amount of down buses that we can manage.
It's kind of like a pressure cooker, right? It opens about, I mean, 30 buses on deadline is probably, right?
Sorry, I phrased that incorrectly. We're talking about 2 different things, right? One is how to get our down buses back in service. The other is how to maintain service in a way that is up to our safety standards. Would the 4 Proterra buses come back online, resolve the service provision
Yes,
problem?
yeah, right. Okay, they're down for a very specific recall. They're not like a bus, for example, that's down because it was consistent. It's a problem.
Because the board member is driving behind it, noticing the dark exhaust coming out of it, for example.
Well, the DPL.
You said 2 years and these buses are gonna have to retire. What do we do? Do we get any money back? Like, do we sell them to some market?
Part of the public auction.
Public auction? So would you get more back if you put the 60,000 into them? Nothing.
No, but what we would do is we cherry pick. Ray does a lot of work identifying the exact vehicles that we get rid of. So sometimes we've got series of buses that are still operating, and we retire half of them. Well, half of them sticks around for an additional 2 years beyond their rated life. That's a strategy we do, right? But we have to do that based on the investments that have been made in the vehicle. Maintenance weighs in, says this is a good bus, this is a bad bus.
You've already weighed that.
Let's get it in. Well, I think that's probably a part of the conversation.
Okay.
I mean, this is more or less just a fact that's contributing to the picture. I'm not saying that the decision we made.
Yeah.
I included it because I really, in this conversation, I didn't want to come in and say, well, the problem's a problem, we're fixing it. I wanted to give you some tangible examples of the things that we're kind of weighing and working on. And I'll continue to do that, but I think that those are strategies we're looking at. Right? So,
Just for kids, I mean, this DC circulator is gone. Where do those buses go?
We gotta have capital money to buy.
No, but I mean, they're not new buses, so, and they may have a good life left to them, I don't know.
I don't know. We're looking at that.
Okay.
I will say, we've been very careful about circulators, both in regards to people and the resources. There was never an investment in circulator. Oh, okay.
Wasn't that
The city
First
took a
Transit?
Very low bar, so.
Okay.
So contracted for the minimum.
No
price, do the minimum.
PM or anything.
Yeah, do the minimum work, so, not talking bad about our current circulator, but just saying that they weren't set up. I think, financially supported environment. Where they can
Well, that makes sense. Well, we're not-
Josh, I know we have to move on soon, but I have to ask this. You said something, you used the term that this, like snuck up on us. You're kind of generous with your description about how, it's because the team was really, high ownership, something about tackling the problem. And then you described some leadership changes. So what's changed in the departmental leadership culture that gives you confidence that we're not gonna end up in a situation like this, right? What metric are you tracking now that you weren't at your level that?
Yeah, well, the entire leadership,
Stuff is gonna sneak up.
the entire leadership of the department, is brand new, all the way to the top. And I'm not saying the previous leadership wasn't forthcoming potentially in what they were doing. I think they may have had a different perspective on some things. I rely heavily on my leadership team to inform me of what's going on. And Stephanie and the team that she has in place is working really hard to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen in the future. Again, I'm not convinced it's entirely leadership issue. It was really more of we have a variety of factors coming together to kind of form this one position place. And again, we're still ahead of it. Again, we're still meeting service. But we're trying to get ahead of it even further and make sure that there isn't a surprise where one day you got a message came out on Twitter and said X number of staff across services have been canceled today. We don't want to be there. We're working hard not to be there. You want to after that stuff, I want to give her for this, but she's really been in this, and I want to give credit for the time and effort we've been spending with the new leadership team.
Yeah, I think it's probably important is that when I came into my role, and I'll be clear that of the new leadership team, I'm the most tenured at this point over maintenance, and I've been in the past. Just to give you some context here, but one of the first things that I did was navigate the work of maintenance, was doing these assessments. And one of the things we identified last fall was that there were there wasn't a maintenance manager, there wasn't a maintenance. We had technicians that were performing work without proper oversight. So that assessment was done last fall, the structure was approved in December. It takes months to fill those positions. As recently as August, we have a maintenance manager that is fine with it. Yep. And it's with those improvements and those new staff coming on that now we start getting to understand really what's happening and what we need to do. What steps we need to take to kind of keep moving forward. So that's why we're having this discussion now. We have a much clearer picture of where we can go. We want to get it done.
Yeah, it's sort of the idea that by the tech is just, like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Here's another thing, I'm doing it. They're not out there saying, wait a minute, you're also working all these hours and you're also, right? Hopefully that's helpful. Like, that's what I'm saying in the leadership.
What I'm hearing, Josh, is also we're gonna have an opportunity to dive more deeply into kind of some of the ways that we're also, as an employer, working to fill some of these gaps and understanding kind of some of the organizational policies.
And that's a big part of the future. I know we can't do this meeting, but future meetings where we have these departmental updates. We give you all some of the insights into what that's going on. Very much just keep you informed and help you understand.
Yeah, and I think given the hour, we're gonna postpone both the departmental highlight and the capital project strategy, but we'll make those our priorities for November to cover.
And I will just wrap up by saying that between now and the next meeting, please bear with us. The agenda might look differently again. We're trying to finalize the selection of the board management platform. Just a couple of quick highlights. You will in the future have access to all of your past and future board materials, documents, communications, minutes, all on your computer, iPad. Don't have a device and need one, and supply you one. The agenda will come out electronically and post electronically for our attendees. And you'll be able to have it be much more efficient for you. And hopefully it'll be a better experience for you. We didn't give you the back end of that platform in this, so that's why it's kind of a weird printed thing. You had some issues because we didn't want to get you logged into something if that's not where.
And you're trying different platforms, so it may look a little different in the next few months until you've identified what vendor you're gonna.
But the structure and the flow of the meeting, we're committed to, and we're happy to have the format in place.
And you have your ridership graph, which is August is amazing.
Yeah,
August is the kind of number we saw last year in the spring, which is typically our and the fall and the late fall, which is our highest. So I mean, we're gonna we may hit 6 million this year. I mean, that's not out of the question. Pretty cool.
next section started.
Matt has the motion, so we can go ahead and I think read those while we yeah.
Okay, I, Matt Harris, move that the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711. A1 of the Code of Virginia.
Moved by Matt, second by Harish, all in favor? Aye. For executive session, I'll report now. Our next board meeting will be at City Hall, November 13th, 5:30 p.m.
I, Matt Harris, hereby move to reconvene the public meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors.
Been moved. Is there a second? Second, Harish, all in favor? Aye. All right.
I, Matt Harris, hereby move to certify that during the executive session of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors, only those matters specified in the meeting, the session will discuss pursuant to section 2.2-3711, A1 of the Code of Virginia.
Moved. Is there a second? Second, Harish, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We need the motion. We've already announced the meeting, so we just need a motion.
So go to adjourn.
So Jesse, second Harish, all in favor? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Turning live.